Uh,
Great. How many votes are cast?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for being here with us. I'm going to ask our team to go ahead and please admit any reporters who are in the queue. We are already live broadcasting. I'm going to just see if participants are on. We have a very large number of reporters with us today, so thank you all for being here. This is Jessica Corbett, Director of External Affairs for Fulton County. I'm here with Chairman Rob Hitz, County Manager Dick Anderson, and Fulton County Registration Elections Director Richard Barron. Chairman Pitts is going to start us off, and then you'll hear from Mr. Barron. I'll ask the County Manager to chime in as well, and then after some remarks, we'll take some questions. Go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
We ready?
Yes, sir.
All right, well, good morning, everyone, still morning, and thank you for joining us. This is day 2 of 19 days of early voting. And I want to say that from my perspective, and we've been talking about this morning, and it's actually last night and this morning, that we think that day 1 was a successful day for us. There was obviously a huge turnout. First day is always a huge turnout, but couple that with a holiday that sort of added to the volume that we saw. And then thirdly, probably nationally and even internationally, the interest in this election on November 3rd. It's going to be, as someone would say, it's going to be huge and historic and unprecedented. So we're prepared. In fact, there were some 20,000, approximately 20,000 people who took the time to vote on yesterday, on day one. There were a couple of glitches, some minor. In fact, most of them were minor at a couple of the early voting locations, as to be expected. In some cases, poll workers did not show up, one or two. We had to make adjustments, call in people. There were, in a couple of the precincts, a printer didn't work, or a scanner or two didn't work. Those were problems that were easily fixed, and we fixed them fairly quickly. The issue, though, with State Farm Arena, which I refer to as Election Central for us, that is the big daddy for us. There was an issue there early on, but I want to start by, again, and I cannot thank the Atlanta Hawks enough for their partnership with us in making that arena and their staff available to us as we seek to conduct a very successful election on November 3rd. Their people, the Hawks people, Steve Futon and his people, they were there at 12:01 a.m. getting set up, and they were set up. They opened the doors exactly at 8 o'clock a.m. ready to go. But that's where we encountered a problem with the poll pads. If you recall, the thing that kept me up all along was the possibility that there could be some issue with the poll pads, and poll pads, that's the one thing that we do not control. And there was a small problem. The Hawks personnel, along with our Director of Elections, Mr. Rick Barron, and our IT people, they quickly isolated the problem. And within 40 minutes of isolating the problem, we were up and running. And the rest of the day at State Farm ran quite smoothly. In fact, right under 3,000 citizens of Fulton County chose to vote at State Farm Arena. Once the little glitch was fixed, it took no longer than 15 minutes for anyone to come to State Farm Arena and cast their votes. And lastly, before I turn it over to Director Barron, people from all across the county decided to cast their votes early at State Farm Arena because of the fact that the newness of it, it's a unique voting experience, it's a very pleasant experience, and they took the time to drive or come by bus to vote at State Farm Arena. And quite frankly, I'm encouraging others, if you go to a location, one of the early voting locations, and it's crowded, come on down to State Farm Arena, and we'll go into, we have 300 voting locations there. Hawks personnel, well-trained, even Coach Pierce was there greeting people. We'll have players there greeting people. Steve Futon will be there greeting people. I'll be there, the manager will be there. That's Election Central for us, and it is a big deal for us. So come on down to State Farm Arena. That being said, my takeaway from this is that day one of 19 days was successful. The glitches that we encountered, we were able to correct fairly quickly, and things are moving smoothly. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Rick Barron, our Director of Registration and Elections. Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, yesterday was that's our second busiest day in early voting history for Fulton County. As the chairman said, we had close to 20,000 people vote yesterday. Typically, our busiest day of early voting is our last day. So we're expecting to exceed 30,000 voters that day. In 2016, we had more than 26,000 vote on the last day. The last day of early voting in 2016 is the only day that we've had that been busier than what we experienced yesterday. We had lines around the county, but I think in comparison to other counties, ours were shorter. And actually, if voters would probably save time by going to State Farm, driving from wherever they are and going to vote at State Farm, because they processed almost 3,000 voters yesterday. And other than in the morning, they didn't have lines the rest of the day, and that's the way it's going over there again today. And the other thing is that what I would encourage voters to do is if they've applied for an absentee by mail, to go to the Secretary of State's website, sign up to track their ballot and to vote that ballot rather than going to the early voting sites and canceling their ballot by mail application. That if voters go to the precinct or the early voting site to cancel their ballot by mail application during early voting, that contributes to extending the lines. I know that's been going on statewide, and I've received reports that we're having a lot of people cancel their ballot by mails in the precincts today even. We have 30 permanent locations open. We have 2 buses that are out in around the county. They're going to be visiting 24 mobile locations over the next 18 days throughout the 19-day period. We have 7 outreach locations that we have scheduled to be open. The total for us is that we're going to be visiting or open at 61 different locations during this early voting period. As I said before, we have more locations open than the other 3 big metro counties combined. And I also want to reiterate that people should use State Farm because they have the capacity with their 60 check-in stations and 302 ballot marking devices to process a ton of voters there. Yesterday was successful. We always have, it seems like there are some issues when you open on the first day, but we were able to recover from those quickly. And I think buying the Cradle Point routers ahead of this election enabled us to correct the issue early in the morning yesterday at State Farm and get voters through. Once we had all those poll pads reset, we cleared that line at State Farm in about 15 to 20 minutes, which was very comforting to see that purchase of technology that is there as a fail-safe helped.
Okay, Mr. Manager, Dick Anderson, our county manager, is here with us also. Mr. Manager, would you like to add anything?
Well, just to reiterate what the chairman and Rick have already said, we're offering, I think, a plethora of options for the voter. And one I'll just highlight again that Rick mentioned is the mobile voting sites. From my own experience this morning in Roswell, I visited a mobile voting site at Mount Pisgah United Methodist Church, which is in Johns Creek, but just up the street from the East Roswell Library. I chose to vote there. That's where I attend church. And then I drove down the street and found a line probably that was an hour to an hour and a half long. And as I talked to folks in line and let them know about the mobile voting site, several of them did leave from that line and take advantage since there was no wait at the mobile voting site. So I would just encourage voters to look online, look at all of our sites. Any site is available for you to vote at. There is some confusion at times when I'm talking to voters about that they believe that they have to go to the precinct that they're assigned to. On early voting, they have the option. That's why we keep emphasizing State Farm Arena as the preeminent option. But these mobile sites or other sites are equally available to you. So one, again, way to avoid lines is to kind of optimize your choice around where folks are and where they are not.
Yeah, and there's free parking at State Farm. The MARTA station is open right outside the doors at State Farm. So there are conveniences there that allow voters to get in and out quickly.
Okay, Ms. Corbett.
Thank you. Well, we have a few questions in the chat, and I also have some folks who raised their hands. So I'm going to start with the questions in the chat really quickly. I believe and I apologize, guys, we had a late setup, so we've been doing meetings back to back. So I'm going to trust that the recording privileges, and I think we adjusted the shot. We have a question here about the polling pads and how essential are they to casting ballots? Who controls them? Mr. Barron, could you talk to us a little bit about that?
Well, they're manufactured by No Ink, and over the last, starting towards the end of August, at Fulton County, we've developed a close partnership with No Ink, who manufactures the poll pads. And I think we've been learning more and more about them as we've developed this partnership. They've also helped us get the bandwidth and access points in our warehouse set up so that we can update the bulk file quicker. And I think as we've learned more about this product, we're better equipped to help voters during early voting. It's used to activate the cards once you get the ballot code from ElectionNet. On election day, it's the primary method of check-in. The entire statewide voter file is put on it for election day, whereas during early voting, you check in with ElectionNet, you get the ballot code from ElectionNet, and you go to the poll pad for that, and then that's what activates the card, is the poll pad.
Thank you. And I think a follow-up question we just received was about whether there were any concerns that these issues with poll pads would persist through election day.
Well, during early voting, I think I'm not concerned about the remainder of early voting with the poll pads, but also we're getting access today, since I purchased all the Cradle points for Fulton County. We are getting access to what's called the ePulse dashboard. And I think we're the only county in the state that has this access. And so we're gonna be able to monitor the health or the status of each poll pad in all the early voting locations after it's set up today. And that is going to help us see things in the future. That is also going to allow us on election day to see the health and status of all of the poll pads out in the field on election day as well. And when we have a Cradle Point router out in each of the election day sites, we are going to be able to have the technician there to walk them through any fixes that need to be made if something occurs. And I think that's going to give us a capability that is unseen in the other 158 counties in the state. It would cost us $100,000 to get those Cradle Point routers for the poll pads, but it also gives us the chance to recover if any issues should arise and do it rapidly.
Let me just add to that. I think when I voiced my concern about the poll pads, that Mr. Barron was very proactive and took the initiative to purchase those Cradle Point routers in the event that something happened, and something did happen, and we had the Cradle Point routers, and therefore we were able to take corrective action immediately to get those poll pads up and working. So it's to his credit that we had those Cradle Point routers, and the problem that the little glitch, I won't say problem, the glitch that we had, we were able to fix it quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Barron. One other question we had, I'm just going to take these chronologically, was about what are we doing to decrease lines at other precincts aside from encouraging voters to go to State Farm?
Well, I think right now we're experiencing lines. We have more locations open now. Today we have 33 locations open. In 2016, the second day of early voting, we had 25 locations open. So we've got 33% more locations open now than we did back then. That's if we had stayed at this, I guess if we had remained static as to where we were in 2016, the lines would be even worse. So we anticipated that we were going to have lines. I think the interest in the election is greater than it's ever been. And the one thing that the county manager mentioned is that voters can go to any early voting location. We do have 3 mega sites open. We've got the Benson Center at Sandy Springs, we've got State Farm, we've got Georgia International Convention Center. But if voters see, the great thing about early voting is you can choose the time and the place and the date when you go. And if you get there and you see that the line is 2 hours, you can try another site, or you can choose another day to go. I think as in the third week, the last 2 days are going to be very busy. And I would imagine we're going to be exceeding 20-some thousand voters and maybe 30,000 on the last day. So I would just avoid those days, but we're open 8 to 6, Monday through Saturday. We're open for the first 2 weeks. We're open 10 to 6 on both Sundays, those are hours that are greater than what we had in 2016 or any other Sunday hours. So, and then the last week we'll be open 7 to 7 to try to service as many voters as possible in those final 5 days. And also another thing that is affecting, again, we need to encourage voters to vote by mail if they've applied that way, because that affects the lines in the polling places. We're also experiencing there's some slowness with ElectionNet statewide, and that is causing issues for voters. That's extending the lines because they're having to wait longer, because it takes longer for us to process a voter if the statewide voter registration system is slow.
Thank you, Mr. Barron. Next question is about voters at Chasteen Park. We heard this question yesterday from a reporter that there were concerns about Chasteen Park. It is a recreation center. They said a basketball game was going on with no masks and the doors were shut, so there wasn't ventilation. Mr. Anderson, I know you had been a chairman as well.
Let me start with that one. I voted at Chasteen Park gym for 25 years, and it is true. When you go in, it's a gym. And when I was always the first one to vote, I'd get there 5 in the morning, so I would be seated in the stands looking down at the guys who would come in play basketball. Now, this was pre-coronavirus, so it's true. But that is not a facility that is owned nor controlled by Fulton County. But Mr. Anderson, if you want to go into detail about what happened.
Yes, I did reach out to my counterpart at the city of Atlanta. And again, we have a great partnership and relationship. He immediately reached out to the nonprofit that runs that program, and they are in contact with them now to intervene and cause that situation to be resolved. So I have confidence that it'll be resolved going forward. Thank
you. I'm going to just scroll down and get to our next questions, then we'll take the folks who are on the line as well. A question from Audrey Proctor: were machines down for the first hour at Wolf Creek Library on Monday? Why did this happen? Was there a dress rehearsal? And were there technicians at every precinct?
We did have technicians at every precinct, and I'm unaware of anything being done at Wolf Creek yesterday. I'd have to ask my staff, but that's the first I've heard of that.
Thank you. Next question from Amy Gardner. Are there more precincts now than before the Shelby decision? And how many voters have spoiled their ballots to vote early?
I don't have the figure of how many voters have canceled their ballot applications yet. I just know that I'm getting reports that there are many voters in line that are canceling their applications. We've processed more than 220,000 applications, probably close to 40,000 of those have been duplicates or rejected applications, but we have mailed out more than 190,000 absentee by mail ballots. And voters, from what I'm told, it's taking 7 to 14 days from the time there's an issue date until the time it arrives in the mailbox. For me, it took 9 days for me to receive it from the date that ballot track said it went into the mail. So I just ask that voters be patient. If you have an issue date already, your ballot is on the way, and you will get that. If you've gone past 2 weeks from the date that it was mailed on ballot tracks, then the voters can then get in touch with our office. We can determine what the best course is.
Thank you very much. We got a couple more questions in the chat. This is question is about something that is making the rounds on Facebook. It goes like this: if you are checking in at the polls and they happen to write anything on your ballot before they give it to you to put in a voting machine, such as a letter, a check mark, a star, an R and D, or writing of any kind, please request a new ballot. Your ballot could be disqualified if it's written on. Please be on the lookout for this kind of behavior. Is this accurate, or is this an urban legend?
Like much on social media, it's an urban legend. And when a voter goes to a ballot marking device, they print out their own ballot and then put it into the scanner themselves. No one else should touch their ballot.
Thank you. A question from another reporter here: will there be more machines deployed at early voting sites that continue to have lines? Many voters reported fewer than 10 BMDs at locations outside of the mega sites.
The early voting locations, we generally put the number of machines in a polling site based on the room size and how we can deal with voter flow in each one of the rooms. The mega sites are there to alleviate some of the pressure on all of the early voting sites. We have more units in these early voting sites than we've ever had this year. We are at capacity for our resources for early voting. And I think if you look at what Fulton County is offering to enfranchised voters, having 33 locations open today, when DeKalb, Gwinnett, and Cobb only have 30 locations open today between the three of them, I don't think there's any argument that could be made that Fulton County isn't doing its part to make sure we enfranchise our voters. And we understand that there are lines, but there is a heightened interest right now. And there are ways for voters, if voters do not want to wait in line, they can request an absentee by mail. They can go to the Secretary of State's portal and request an absentee by mail, and we can get that out to the voters that want to avoid any lines because of not wanting to wait or because of concerns regarding COVID.
Thank you, Mr. Barron. This is the last one I'm going to take from the chat, then I'm going to go to the hands raised. Are there more, this is a follow-up on a previous question about, are there more precincts now than before the Shelby decision?
Well, if you're talking about election day, there are more, we're going to have more polling or election day locations than we've ever had. It's nothing that is tied to the Shelby decision. Before the pandemic, we had planned on trying to get up to 210 to 220 locations this year. But after what we saw in June, after we lost a quarter of our polling locations, we made the determination that it would be better. The best thing we can do is try to get as many of our locations under 5,000 registered voters as possible to service voters better. And we achieved that goal, almost completely achieved that goal by getting up to 255 locations for election day. 91 of those are new, and voters need to check the My Voter page or determine where they need to go on election day, because on election day, you have to vote in your precinct, whereas during early voting, you have the choice of when and where to go. If you vote outside of your assigned precinct on election day, you have to vote a provisional ballot. That's going to take you about 3 times as long to cast your ballot as it would if you vote in your assigned precinct.
Thank you, Mr. Barron. Next question, I'm going to call on Doug Richards. Doug, I'm unmuting you now. Oops, hold on. Okay, unmute. Sorry, I'm having a little trouble here.
Hi there.
Hey, Doug. Okay, go ahead.
Hey, good morning. It appears some other counties have initiated online dashboards to show voters to some extent in real time where crowds are at early voting precincts. Does Fulton County have any plans for that, or are you doing it already and I haven't heard about it? A, and then B, when folks see long lines, they automatically start talking about voter suppression. Do you have any response to that?
Well, we are beta testing something behind the scenes for wait times for early voting. And one of the things we have to get the technician, before we put it up, we want to make sure that the technicians that are in the field are populating that information so that it's accurate for voters before we make it public. But I think that you will see something this week go up on our website, and maybe I'm unsure if it'll go up on our Fulton Vote app, but it will probably be on the website at least. With regard to voter suppression, early voting is it's a 19-day period in which voters have the opportunity to vote at any location. We made the commitment since 2013 to offer more early voting locations than anyone else and to enfranchise our voters that way. And if you have a lot of people engaged in the process and a lot of people showing up and a high volume of voters, no matter how many polling locations you open up during early voting, you're going to have lines. It's not necessarily voter suppression if you've provided all of these locations during an early voting format and there happen to be lines. Every presidential election during early voting, we have lines, and we tried to anticipate that. But right now we have stretched ourselves to the limit with regard to how much equipment we can get out there, because much of this we have to reuse for election day, so it has to be turned around. We have the staffing resources are stretched to the limit. We've got security concerns. We're paying to have officers at all of these sites. There are a lot of financial concerns with all of this, but we're making it happen. And I think if you look around the state, Fulton's wait time numbers are probably far less than any other county, and it's because of the volume of locations that we're offering.
Thank you. Next question, please, from Ben Brash. Ben, go ahead.
Thanks so much, and thank you for having this today. What was the cause of the poll pad issue yesterday at State Farm? And second part of this, did you ever figure out the Fulton OC library issue? I got a note from a state representative saying others were having the issue, which might be a poll pad problem. Thank you.
No, it wasn't a poll pad problem, and I think there was some sort of an assignment problem, and I don't know all the details with it, but there shouldn't be any more issues with regard to that. And I think it was an assignment issue with an Easy Vote, which is it's our application that allows us to print absentee by mail applications. So that has been resolved. With regard to the poll pad, the file, there was an issue with the config file that was imported into the poll pads, and it was isolated to State Farm. And so that yesterday morning, we went in and we re-imported that, and it worked great the rest of the day. They were able to clear out that line quickly, and we should have no more issues there with the poll pads the rest of the election.
Was that a fluke, or is that something you're worried about might be replicable, or?
You mean during replicable during early voting or for election day?
Either. Just in general, if you're worried about that.
I'm not worried about it for early voting. I think for doing the bulk file update after early voting ends before election day, I think now we've got the capability. It's a different process for election day than setting it up for early voting. But we've done several things out of our warehouse to increase the bandwidth and how quickly the files can be imported onto the poll pads. And we went out, we worked with No Ink, we got what's called a cache box. So we're able to pull that file down, put it into the cache box, and push a strong Wi-Fi signal into the poll pads to make sure that those files that are on there don't get corrupted during the update. And I think now that we've got that dashboard, the ePulse dashboard that I've talked about set up today, we should be confident before we we allot those for distribution on the Sunday before Election Day by looking on our dashboard to see that all of our poll pads are ready to go. We did not have that capability before early voting started, but we will have that for Election Day, and hopefully that will eliminate any of these issues going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Next question from Emil Moffat at WABE.
Hey, Rick, are paper poll books the backups required for early voting or just for Election Day? And have you identified any equipment problems that are kind of recurring or popping up that you're noticing a lot as we go through early voting?
We haven't had any equipment issues that have been during early voting that seem to be system-wide or more than something that occurs for a few minutes at a location. What was the rest of your question?
On the paper backup of the poll books?
Those are required for Election Day, and we will put one of those in each of the Election Day locations. We used to put a list out there that was it was called an electors list. It's similar, and the paper poll book will be more comprehensive. We're getting a vendor that can do that because we have to produce that the day before we distribute all of the supplies to poll workers on the Sunday before Election Day. We have to wait until early voting's over before we produce that paper poll book.
Thank you.
Thanks, Emil. Next question, please, Veronica Waters. Veronica, go ahead.
You already asked my question. Thank you, Jessica.
Okay, thanks, Veronica. We have one caller who has a question, 404-735-8889. Go ahead. Hello? All right, I'm going to assume that person just wants to listen in. All right, with that, I believe we have answered all the questions. Last call, but I really appreciate everyone tuning in for all your support and helping us get the word out to voters. And we will continue to provide updates throughout the process. Of course, if you have any questions, please reach out to us. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well.